Do you want to sleep? Then listen to me. Turn off the lights, close the windows, now close them and listen to you. Finally, I will make a request to you. Put down your phone and listen to my voice. Listen clearly. I will now tell you a story that will make you sleepy. Close your eyes and listen carefully to my words.
Before the maps had names, and before rivers learned where to bend, there was a city that believed it had been chosen by the morning itself. It rose where fog lifted slowly from the earth, where the sun did not burst into the sky, but arrived gently, as if invited. The people who lived there said the light favored them. They said the day always came to their dates first, and because of that, they believed the world began with them. This city had many names across the centuries, most of them now forgotten. The oldest tablets call it Alu-En, the place that stands. Others would later call it simply the first city, though many cities would eventually claim that title. But to its builders, it was not first because of age, it was first because of intention. They did not settle there by accident. The land was harsh in a quiet way. No dramatic mountains, no endless forests, no roaring seas, just soil that cracked when neglected and flourished when tended with care. The people learned early that survival depended on cooperation. One family could not command the river, one voice could not call the rain, but many voices together could dig channels, raise embankments, and turn uncertainty into rhythm. And so they gathered. At first, it was seasonal, tents near the water, fires at night, stories exchanged in a shared tongue that had not yet learned to fracture. Children grew up hearing the same words from every adult mouth. There were no strangers, because there were no borders yet, only distance. Over time, tents became walls, walls became courtyards, courtyards became neighborhoods, and somewhere along the way, a realization settled into the collective mind of the people. They were no longer merely surviving, they were shaping the world. This realization is subtle when it happens, almost invisible. No one announces it, no trumpet sounds, but it changes everything. Once people understand that the land responds to planning, that nature can be guided rather than feared, they begin to ask larger questions. What else can we shape? The elders of Alu-En gathered at the center of the city, where the ground was slightly raised, not by design at first, but by generations of living. Ash, broken pottery, discarded tools, all of it had accumulated until the earth itself remembered them. Standing there felt different. Sound carried differently. Wind behaved differently. People noticed. So they built there. Not a house, not a palace, something else. A platform. It was low at first, hardly more than a statement, a declaration that this place mattered more than the others, that what happened here connected the people not just to each other, but to whatever forces watched from beyond the sky. They did not yet call those forces gods. That word would come later, heavy with ritual and fear. For now, they spoke of listeners, presences that noticed order, that responded to pattern. When fires were laid carefully, when offerings were arranged just so, when words were spoken in the correct sequence, something in the world seemed to lean closer. The platform grew. Each generation added to it, rebuilding rather than replacing, stacking memory upon memory. Children learned that the height mattered, not because it reached the sky, it did not, but because it reminded them to look upward, to remember that the city was not only spread across the land, but oriented towards something above it. And this is where ambition quietly entered the story. Not the crude ambition of conquest or violence, but the more seductive kind. The belief that meaning itself could be constructed, that if the structure was large enough, careful enough, enduring enough, it would secure the city's place in the great unknown. The scribes, newly trained in the art of marks pressed into clay, began to record more than grain counts. They wrote hymns, lists of names, lineages that stretched back to founders who were already half legend. Writing did something dangerous here. It froze memory. Before writing, stories breathed. They changed. They softened sharp edges. They forgot what no longer served the present. But once words hardened into clay, the past gained weight, authority, permanence. A written name could outlive a living voice. The leaders of Alu-En noticed this too. If a name could endure, then perhaps the city itself could endure beyond the rise and fall of its people. Perhaps walls and platforms were not enough. Perhaps what they needed was a symbol so large that forgetting became impossible. This idea did not arrive fully formed. It emerged slowly, in phrases repeated often enough to feel inevitable. Let us build higher. Let us leave a mark. Let us make something that time cannot erase. No one argued against it. Why would they? The city had already proven that building worked. Each canal dug had brought more harvest. Each wall raised had brought more safety. Every act of collective effort had paid off. Why should this be different? What they did not yet understand was that success can teach the wrong lesson, that cooperation, when aimed only inward, can become a closed circle, that unity, when left unexamined, can turn into a single will, powerful, efficient, and blind. The platform at the center of Alu-En was no longer enough. Plans were drawn, measurements agreed upon, labor organized not by family, but by function, brickmakers, carriers, overseers. The language of work became sharper, more specialized. Words gained new meanings, commands replaced requests. Still, everyone spoke the same tongue. And because of that, the city moved as one. From a distance, travelers would later describe it as miraculous. Thousands of hands, thousands of feet, all following the same rhythm. Songs timed to lifts, chants that kept the pace. A single voice could ripple outward and be understood by all. But within the city, something quieter was happening. The stories told at night began to change. They were no longer about rivers and animals and chance encounters with the unknown. They were about the city itself, its destiny, its greatness, its future. Children grew up hearing that they belonged to something unfinished, something that needed them. And so they worked, brick by brick, layer by layer, memory upon memory. They believed they were building upward. They did not yet realize they were narrowing their view. As the structure rose, the city began to change its posture. People noticed it first in their bodies, not their thoughts. Necks tilted upward more often, shadows lengthened in unfamiliar ways. Streets that once opened easily into the horizon now ended in brick and geometry. The tower, though no one called it that yet, rearranged the city simply by existing. Morning light struck its upper courses before it touched the houses below. At dawn, the top glowed while the streets remained cool and blue. This detail mattered. People began to mark time by it. The light has reached the high place, they would say. The day has truly begun. What had once been a platform for ritual was now becoming a reference point for reality itself. The builders worked in tiers. Each level was slightly smaller than the one beneath it, not for beauty alone, but for stability. The engineers, though they had no word for that role yet, understood weight intuitively. Mud brick could rise only so far before it demanded respect. Bitumen sealed the seams. Reeds were laid between courses to flex against stress. This was not reckless construction. It was careful, intelligent, and that was precisely the danger. because nothing failed. Every season, the tower stood taller than before. Floods came and went, walls cracked elsewhere in the city, but the great structure endured. Success became evidence. Evidence became proof. Proof hardened into belief. The belief was simple: we are meant to do this. The priests, who once served primarily as caretakers of ritual, found themselves reinterpreting tradition to match the new reality. Old hymns were revised. Phrases that spoke of the gods descending were now balanced with verses about humans ascending. The change was subtle, almost elegant. They did not say the gods were unnecessary. They said the gods had invited the effort. Offerings multiplied. Incense burned constantly near the base. The air there was thick with sweetness and smoke. People brought small tokens, figurines, beads, inscribed tablets, and left them along the walls, believing that proximity to the rising structure lent their prayers extra weight. Language itself began to stretch. New words entered common use, all related to height, scale, and endurance. Metaphors of elevation replaced older ones tied to soil and water. To be high was to be honorable. To be low was to be forgotten. Even insults changed shape. "You think too close to the ground" became a common rebuke. No one noticed how quickly this vocabulary took root. The scribes were the first to feel the strain. Their work had once been practical, counting grain, tracking labor, recording births and deaths. Now they were asked to do something more abstract. They were to define the purpose of the structure in words precise enough to be carved and stored. This was harder than expected. Different elders described the project differently. Some said it was a dwelling place for the divine. Others insisted it was a signal, a marker visible to the farthest lands, declaring the city's importance. A few, quieter voices suggested it was simply a way to prevent scattering, to keep the people together in one place forever. That last idea troubled the scribes, not because it seemed wrong, but because it seemed true. They could see it in the labor rosters. Fewer people left the city now. Traders came and stayed. Families postponed migration. The tower had become an anchor. To leave it felt like stepping away from history itself. Unity, once natural, was now enforced by gravity of meaning. The tower required coordination on a scale never attempted before. Instructions traveled up and down its length daily. A shouted command of the base might pass through 10 mouths before reaching the upper levels. Each repetition mattered. A misplaced word could mean a dropped load, a cracked brick, a dead worker. And so, clarity became sacred. Ambiguity was dangerous. Precision was praised. The language tightened, favoring efficiency over poetry. Older expressions fell out of use because they were too flexible, too open to interpretation. The shared tongue was one, but it was no longer innocent. Children learned it differently than their grandparents had. They learned it as a tool first, a means of coordination. Stories were shortened, songs simplified. What mattered was that everyone understood quickly, exactly in the same way. The tower climbed higher. From its upper terraces on clear days, the river could be seen bending like a dark ribbon across the land. The marshes shimmered. Distant settlements appeared small, almost unreal. Standing there gave a peculiar sensation, not just of height, but of separation. Those below looked up. Those above looked out. The priests interpreted this too. They began to speak of levels of understanding, of wisdom gained through ascent, of truth revealed only when one left the ground behind. Access to the higher terraces became restricted, first informally, then by decree. Not everyone needed to go up, they said. Not everyone could bear it. No one argued. The structure was no longer just a building, it was a filter. In somewhere beyond the city, beyond the river bends and reed beds, the world continued as it always had. Villages rose and fell. Languages shifted slowly, naturally. People adapted to place and season. But Alun no longer thought of itself as part of that world. It was becoming its own horizon. And it was at this moment, when the tower was stable, the people united, the language sharpened, and the purpose unquestioned, that the story pauses. Because every great structure reaches a point where the next step is no longer architectural, it is philosophical. And that is where the trouble begins. No one noticed the moment it began. That is the nature of fractures. They do not announce themselves with noise. They appear as hairline separations, invisible unless you are already looking for them. And in a city convinced of its own clarity, no one was looking for cracks. The towers stood higher than any structure the people had ever imagined. Its uppermost terrace was now often hidden by haze, the air thinning just enough to dull sound and distort distance. Words shouted upward arrived softened. Instructions sent downward returned altered. Not wrong exactly, but shifted. At first, it was dismissed as wind. A foreman at the third tier asked for fired brick. The carriers arrived with sun-dried ones instead. The difference mattered. A corner weakened. It was corrected. A note was made. No blame assigned. Another day, a signal horn sounded twice instead of once. 2 teams moved when only 1 was needed. They laughed about it later. Someone joked that even the air was getting tired up there. The language was still shared. The words were the same. But context, once supplied effortlessly by shared experience, was beginning to thin. The city had grown too vertically for intuition to travel unassisted. To compensate, the overseers introduced more signals, more standardized phrases, hand gestures, rhythm taps. They believed the solution to miscommunication was refinement, not reflection. And again, it worked. For a while. But each new layer of precision removed something human from the exchange. Tone mattered less. Familiarity mattered less. A word became a function, not a relationship. People understood what to do, but less often why. The scribes noticed a change in the tablets. Disputes were being recorded more frequently. Not dramatic conflicts, nothing violent, but disagreements over responsibility, over meaning, over intent. One man claimed he had followed instructions exactly. Another insisted the instruction itself had been unclear. Both were right. The priests, too, felt a subtle unease. Rituals performed on the higher levels did not feel the same as those below. Offerings burned differently. Smoke dispersed too quickly. Prayers spoken at altitude seemed to vanish rather than linger. Some took this as a sign of divine closeness. Others felt something like absence. Whispers began, not open dissent, just questions folded into casual remarks. Those below looked up. Those above looked out. The priests interpreted this too. They began to speak of levels of understanding, of wisdom gained through ascent, of truth revealed only when one left the ground behind. Access to the higher terraces became restricted, first informally, then by decree. Not everyone needed to go up, they said. Not everyone could bear it. No one argued. The structure was no longer just a building, it was a filter. In somewhere beyond the city, beyond the river bends and reed beds, the world continued as it always had. Villages rose and fell. Languages shifted slowly, naturally. People adapted to place and season. But Alun no longer thought of itself as part of that world. It was becoming its own horizon. And it was at this moment, When the tower was stable, the people united, the language sharpened, and the purpose unquestioned, that the story pauses. Because every great structure reaches a point where the next step is no longer architectural, it is philosophical. And that is where the trouble begins.
Morning came without ceremony. The sun reached the upper tiers as it always had, but fewer people noticed. Those who did looked up with a different expression now. Not pride, not awe, but calculation. The tower was no longer a shared symbol. It had become a question. Work resumed because routine is the last refuge of certainty. But the rhythm was gone. Commands were repeated 3, 4 times. Clarifications stacked upon clarifications. Where a glance once sufficed, now there were arguments. People began to choose sides without realizing they were doing so. Not sides of belief or ideology, but of comprehension. Those who understood one another naturally gravitated together. They shared assumptions. They finished each other's sentences. Working with them felt easy, almost comforting. Others, speaking the same words but with unfamiliar emphasis or cadence, felt strangely exhausting. "It's like talking through water," someone said. "You hear it, but it doesn't arrive whole." The overseers responded with structure. They divided the workforce into units. Each unit was given a clear leader, a defined vocabulary, a limited scope of responsibility. It was meant to restore order. In practice, it formalized separation. Units developed their own shorthand, their own preferred expressions, their own ways of explaining mistakes that cast themselves in the best light. Communication between units became transactional, stripped of nuance. The tower, once a single project, was now a collection of parallel efforts barely touching at the edges. The priests attempted intervention. They called for a great assembly at the base of the structure. Fires were lit, offerings prepared. The oldest hymns were sung, those that predated the tower, that spoke of rivers and soil and shared breath. For a moment, it almost worked. People remembered older rhythms. Some wept without knowing why. The sound of many voices rising together stirred something deep and fragile. Then came the sermon. The high priest spoke of destiny, of the city's name carried forward into ages yet unborn, of how unity must be protected, even enforced, for the greater good. He warned that division was a temptation, a failure of discipline. His words were carefully chosen, too carefully. Some heard reassurance. Others heard threat. A few heard nothing at all, only sound without meaning. The crowd thinned afterward. Small groups left together, speaking quietly. The fires burned down unattended. That night, arguments erupted in homes across the city. Not loud ones, those had already proven useless, but tense, clipped exchanges, where each person felt unheard and accused without words. By morning, people had begun to pack.
Not everyone, not all at once, just enough to notice. A family here, a workshop there. They claimed practical reasons, better land elsewhere, trade opportunities, a desire for quiet. But beneath every explanation lay the same exhaustion. It had become too hard to speak. The tower noticed. That is to say, its effect on the city changed. Without constant labor, small faults grew. A crack went unrepaired, a drainage channel clogged, rainwater pooled where it shouldn't have. Each problem could have been solved easily if the will to coordinate had still existed. The leaders issued proclamations, carved into clay and displayed in public places. They defined terms, reasserted standards, threatened penalties for non-compliance. The tablets were precise. No one agreed on what they meant. Soon, the proclamations were read only by those who already believed in them. Then came the final attempt. a delegation was sent up the tower to perform a consecration ritual at the highest accessible level. It was meant to renew divine favor, to prove that heaven still sanctioned the ascent. Those who went returned shaken. They spoke of wind that carried words away before they could be finished, of dizziness, of a sense that the sky above them was vast and empty, not hostile, but indifferent. Their reports were interpreted differently by different groups. Some said it was a test, others said it was a warning, a few said it was an answer. Within weeks, large sections of the workforce were gone. The city's markets shrank, the steady flow of food faltered, maintenance overtook ambition. The tower stopped growing. It did not collapse, not yet. It simply paused. And in that pause, people realized something essential. The project required perfect alignment of intention, language, and belief. Without that alignment, the structure was just brick in weight, impressive but inert. One by one, groups left the city. They followed rivers, they crossed plains, they settled where the land felt responsive again, where words did not need constant explanation. As they traveled, their speech changed, slowly at first, then more decisively. New phrases emerged, old ones fell away, pronunciations shifted, meaning adapted to new landscapes. Language, freed from the tower, began to breathe again. Back in the city, those who remained watched the departures with a mix of anger and relief. The pressure eased, the arguments quieted. The tower loomed above them, unfinished and silent. It cast a long shadow at dusk. Children played in that shadow, unaware of its significance. To them, it was simply part of the skyline, like a hill that never moved. The elders knew better. They had built something meant to gather humanity into one name. Instead, it had revealed how fragile such gathering truly was.